So both sides, we're on Pei Dalet and Aleph. We're in the wide lines. And Steve says we should count 14 lines down. And we're going to look for a line that begins with the word Meikara. You find such a line? 11 lines down from the wide lines.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. So after breathing a sigh of relief, and I begin to understand what my mistake is, I wrote the word Wednesday instead of Thursday. Okay, fine. Anyway, the Gemara asks the following question. My of the leg. So what was the secret potion that this Matronisa revealed to Rabbi Yochanan as a therapy for tzafdina, which we said was a gum disease? Omar Rav Acha Breder of Ami Meisior. So this is when you take barley and you soak it in water, and the water apparently absorbs the taste of the barley, and then you add to the concoction shemen zayis umelach. So we've got three ingredients now. We have water that was used for soaking with barley. So I guess we strain off the barley, strain off the water, and we add both oil and salt. That's the opinion of Rav Ach. Now we have the opinion of Rav Yemar, Omar. What did she do for refuah? Siar gufe. So it wasn't the water of the siar that absorbed the taste of the barley, but siar. Now, what is siar? Siar is, I think, do you have the English translation? Maybe I can, Steve, in this case, again, you can help me. I know why I'm always embarrassed that I impose everything on you. But if you could be my English translation guide, I'm not sure if it's that page, but it should be 84A number 2 or number 3. And this sa'ar is usually yeast. Oh, he does say yeast.
I have leaven.
Leaven. Okay, I think leaven is yeast in our language. Or at least yeast is one form of leaven. And he adds to it shemen zayis umelach. So again, we're not talking about mei siar, but rather we're talking about siar itself. Rav Ashi has the third opinion that it was a mishcha. Mishcha means a cream or a something that you anoint the body, and it's made of the gadfa the avza. Now, avza is a duck, and I assume that we're talking about some sort of fatty substance, because whenever you see the word mishcha, it's always going to be a fatty substance. Now, where on the body did she advocate that we smear this concoction? So that's called in Hebrew tzdav, which I believe in English is temples. But I see here in a footnote, he quotes the Rashash, that we should read it as shinov, as the teeth. So this is a cream that you apply to your teeth. Now, how do you get this shuman, this fatty substance? You take it from a bird. I think it's a duck, if I'm not mistaken. You'll tell me the English in a minute, but based on the Hebrew, he seems to imply that after you slaughter the bird, I guess, you take out a certain kind of fatty substance from a small bone in the brain of this fish. But then he writes, Hanitza Barosh Kanafa Of. So the fatty substance is somewhere located at the top of the wing of the oaf. How does he translate it?
Yeah, goose that.
Oh, so he doesn't call it a duck; he calls it a goose. I assume a duck and a goose are two different things.
Yeah.
I don't know how he knows it's a duck. I would a goose. I would say it's a duck. Okay, we can go to Fiddler on the Roof and argue about this, But what is he? How does he translate mishcha? An anointment? An ointment?
Yeah, I mean, this is the fat.
Fat, okay. And what is gadfa? Does he speak about the brain of this goose? Which part of the body? He doesn't. The wing. Oh, you get it from the wing. So he doesn't have anything from the brain. And does he tell you where you apply it? Because Rashash says
Rashi in his temples.
Oh, Rashi learns on his temples. Right, his teeth. It's really fascinating to me that sometimes you can apply a medical therapy to a different limb of the body. Like, for example, after COVID, many people, not just me, I lost only partially my sense of smell. And what they advocated was putting Lavono, which is frankincense, on the earlobes, and not up the nose. When they test you for corona, they put it up your nose. Omar Abaya, no avdi lekulu. I tried every one of these methods. The lowest time, it tasked me, and it didn't work for me. Just like the frankincense didn't help me much. Adi Omar Liahu Taya. Taya is a merchant, an Arab merchant who travels from place to place. And these merchants were known as experts in different mili dialma, as we'd say, different worldly things. And he tells me, I see, bring kashiasa, this zesa. Kashiasa is the pit of an olive, delomolu tilsa. In other words, it's a very young, immature olive. It hasn't even reached a third of its growth. And take those pits, olive pits, klenhu menura, and burn them over a fire, amora chadita, on a vessel that is used to dig, a shovel that's used to dig into the ground. It's got to be new chadita. So we're talking about using, I guess, this shovel as a pan, so the fire comes underneath the pan, and you've placed on top of the pan these garine zesin from a young zayis, the advik b'koche dore, and you should adhere them, attach them to an aisle, a row of teeth of the Achirava. Implemented this recommendation, v'itase, and indeed he testifies that he got well. The first, I think, was probably the easier. The last one, really complicated. Look at all the elements that go into the equation. You got to get the pits of olives. The olives are young olives, premature, and you got to burn them, but you got to first put them into a certain kind of a pan from a new shovel. And then you have to put this thing on your teeth, and you've got to find a row of teeth. Mimai hava. Now it seems that the Gemara is asking a biological question, not a metaphysical question. What causes this kind of a gum disease? Now, I honestly don't understand the Masifta here because he says that the Gemara is talking about Askara. But my Gemara says we're talking about Safdina. What does the English say? Under the words Mimai Hava. Stevie, you with me? Or
Right.
what how do you translate Mimai Hava?
You say from what does but the
So he doesn't mention Askara. I don't know why the Masifta says that we're looking for a cause of Askara. Best of my knowledge, Askara is a throat disease, not a gum disease. Maybe the gum disease somehow affected his throat. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Translation of shines us that Fidna.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. But where did the Masifta get Askara from? I don't know. Anyway, the answer of the Gemara is Mechamimi Chamimi Dechite. So we're talking about a loaf of bread. We're talking about wheat bread. And we're talking about a very hot loaf of bread coming, I guess, right out of the oven, which in many restaurants, you want to get a hot piece of bread, to start the meal. But here, it's apparently not the healthiest thing in the world to eat regular wheat bread that comes right out of the oven and it's very hot. But there's another possible cause of this disease, Mishiyure Kasa Daharsana. Now we're talking about little herring fish or sardines, small fish. And what they did was, after they ate whatever basar, whatever little amount of meat on the fish, they would take whatever was left and they would fry it together with flour and oil. And this was not a healthy thing because shiure means they left it overnight. And a lot of foodstuffs spoil if you leave it overnight. Umay simone, what are the symptoms of this disease? Had rami minei bechache the asa dami b'dei. When he puts a little of it on his teeth, blood starts coming out of his teeth. In other words, his gums are very, very sensitive. Now, how does the English translate? I know that the word bekache means his gums, and I know that kadrami means when he puts. Mili means anything. How does he translate the word anything? Does he just write anything? Something. So he doesn't tell you what he put on his gums, that all of a sudden his gums break out and bleed. I guess anything, meaning they're so sensitive. We had a dentist who used to come to Ashira for years. He was right here in this room, Dr. Brown. If he was around, he would help me with this. Anyway, Rabbi Yochanan ki chosh b'tzaftida avad hachi b'shabsa v'itase. He was involved in the refuah on Shabbos, in this secret potion that was revealed to him by the Matranisa, and he survived. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan, how can he do such a thing? You're not allowed to use refuah on Shabbos. This disease called saftida is different. Hoil umaskil bepeh. It begins in the mouth. Eventually, it's like an infection that will infect your intestines, and that's very dangerous. Amalei Rav Chia bar Abel Rav Yochanan Kiman. whose opinion are you reflecting when you paskin, you ruled for yourself that you're allowed to use this, implement this refuah on Shabbos? Rabbi Masya ben Chorich. Now we get into the issue of what's called a refuah gulit, which we'll explain as we go along. So Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh, the Omer, he says, he's quoted in our Mishnah, Choshesh bepiv, matilin lo sam b'Shabbos. The Chachamim apparently disagree, and they prohibit hatolas sam b'Shabbos. Now, let's go back for a minute to the Mishnah of Rav Masya. I think it was on Gimel Aleph. Oh, okay, Gimel Aleph. Achoshesh begrono, matilin lo sam b'toch piv b'Shabbos, mipnei sofek nefashos. In other words, if you have this disease that apparently affects your gums, it's interesting because the Gemara calls it achoshesh begrono, which is asker. In any event, he allows you to use refuah on Shabbos because, as we said before, the infection might hit your stomach, your intestines, and you could die from it. Now, what do the Chachamim say? The Chachamim, do they hold that this is not a life-threatening disease? So in the footnote, he quotes the Rambam. Yeah, here it is. This is a footnote in Masifta on the Mishnah itself. The Rambam holds that when we allow using medical remedies on Shabbos for a case of a chol of mesukar, what kind of remedies can we allow? And Rav Masya holds that you can allow any remedies that might help. Help. As long as there's some chance in the world that it might help, we're going to use it. But safek nefashos lahakel, says the Rambam. But the Chachamim disagree in a case of refuah b'derech segulis. Segulis is a conjugation of the noun skula. Skula is a kind of remedy which has no medical basis for it. It cannot be proven scientifically to be meaningful. So, for example, the Mishnah records a machlokes that the oseres, which is part of the intestines of a rabid dog. So a person was bitten by a dog, his life is in danger, and on Shabbos, they want to feed him this gula. Let's assume it involves violating the Shabbos and taking out a certain part of the flesh of the dog, which is obviously also to eat. And Rav Masya ben Chorosh is quoted in our Mishnah here on Pei Gimel as allowing it. Some say that Rav Masya thought it was medically and scientifically oisgal. Others say, the Rambam says, that no, this was a refuah skulit. There's nothing in the yoseres, in the kaved of the dog, that would biologically, medically, help a person who was bitten by a rabid dog. So that's one machlokas between Rav Masya and the Chacham. Now the Mishnah quotes another one with regard to the person who has this gum disease. And Rabbi Masya says we're not going to leave any leaf unturned. We'll give him a psalm, even if that psalm is a refuah skulit. That's how the Rambam learned it. So we go back to our Gemara. The Gemara says, Omar Le, I'm sorry, we're up to Rabbi Chia. So Rabbi Chia turns to Rabbi Yochanan. He says, you allowed this on Shabbos based on the remedy of the Matronisa. How could you paskin like Rav Masya? We have a principle that Yochid B'Rabim, Alochid Kirabim. And the Chachamim will not allow you to violate the Shabbos for the sake of a refuah skulit. Omar Le, Rabbi Yochanan responded, Shani Omer Bizu V'lo B'Acheres. That Chachamim agree, they concede to Rabbi Masya in the case of Netilas Sam B'Shabbos. They hold that although to take from the rabid dog, that's prohibited, but they agree that to take this Sam, meaning this potion that was recommended by the Matronis, that is mutter. Now, according to the Rambam that we mentioned before, it means that the Chacham never argued with Rav Masya as far as this Sam for the gum disease, because they held that there was a medical and, shall we say, a natural way in which the chemistry would work here as therapy. But in the case of the rabid dog, they held that's just a skula, and we're not going to allow violating the Shabbos for a skula. Lema Misayele, let's support Rabbi Yochanan from a brisa. The brisa says, Misha achazo yarkom. I'm not sure what this disease is. Maybe he has a name for it, but it means that his face is turning colors.
There's jaundice.
Excellent. Excellent. And what does Rav Steinsaltz have to say? Does he also call it jaundice? And this is excellent.
He says it's hepatitis.
Okay, hepatitis. Hepatitis is a more severe form of jaundice. I think there are two types of jaundice. Hepatitis is the more severe. And even in hepatitis, there's hepatitis A and hepatitis B.
C.
And there's also C. I didn't remember that. So we used to talk about pigeons. You know what I'm talking about? John, you know about the pigeons. He's shaking his head. Steve, you don't know about the pigeons. I don't know if that's Chaim, I can't tell you, because he doesn't have his name there, but believe it or not, they would take pigeons and put it on the chest of the person who has hepatitis. The pigeons would fly and die, all drop dead, and he was healthy. And people have sworn by this. Again, you might call it refuah skulit because I don't know that there's any medical scientific evidence that the pigeons actually suck out the infection of the jaundice. I don't know. In any event, the Brisa says, Misha chazo yerokon, machilin oso b'sar chamor. We feed him the animal of a donkey, the meat of a donkey, which obviously is a trait for animal.
מה קורה? טוב, מה נשמע?
I could try to.
מה איתך? אבל למה אתם בחוץ? אולי כנסו פנימה.
I don't know if it'll
אולי
work.
כנסו פנימה, אני אדליק מזגן.
No.
חם, אלי.
Oh, maybe it did.
כוס מלא, כן.
מה, בוני?
No, it didn't work. Okay, one thing I know that Chaim is there. Chaim, if you hear me, if you can mute your microphone. Anyway, Misha Nishkol Kelev Shotim, Machilin also Michatzar Kovet Shalo. Okay, this is a part of the liver. Again, maybe he tells you which part of the liver it is.
There's just.
Say it again, a little louder.
There's two lobes.
Lobes. He doesn't tell you which lobe it is, the upper lobe or the lower lobe. If it's part of the liver of the, in this case, the rabbit dog. And then it says, Hachoshesh bifiv, matilin lo sam b'Shabbos divrei Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh. Chachamim omrim be'elu ein bahem mishum refuah. Now be'elu means with some of these. So the Gemara is medayik be'elu lemutei mai. Apparently, there is one of these three recommended. I mean, Rabbi Masya's recommended therapies that does pass the test for the Chachamim, and you could implement them on Shabbos, Lemutei Mai, which is the one that even the Chachamim conceded is a bona fide refuah. And the Gemara answers, my love, Lemutei Sam. So that Rabbi Masya is correct, even according to Chachamim, that this Sam, this concoction, is a refuah gemura. It's an absolutely reliable refuah for this gum disease, and you're allowed to use it on Shabbos because of the danger involved in a gum disease. This would prove Rabbi Yochanan Shita that we could rely on Rabbi Masya here because the Chachamim also agreed to Rabbi Masya. And the Sam is permitted on Shabbos for someone who is choshesh b'pir. The Gemara rejects this. Lo, le'ma'ute makizim dam lisrochni. The medical procedure which the Chachamim accepted as a qualified, bona fide medical thing is drawing blood, what they call bloodletting. Now, what does the word lisrochni mean? Srochni is askara. Finally, we get to the word askara, which is called srochni. So just a slightly different form of the same word. And askara is a very grave, serious throat disease. It might be angina, which is called, in English, strep throat. Not sure. But if strep throat gets out of control, you could die from strep throat. You need immediate care with antibiotics. They didn't have antibiotics, but they did akozas hadam, which would lower the blood pressure. I don't know why lowering the blood pressure is going to help the person fight off this disease. Does he have any footnote there from any of the doctors, or maybe Rabbi Steinsaltz has a footnote from the medical people?
Steinsaltz says that it's diphtheria. Diphtheria.
Oh. Does he tell you why bloodletting would help such a disease? Does he give you any medical information here?
No.
No. Okay. We'll just finish up here. Hachidam Yustaber, Titania Chloshaborim, Amr Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi, Sheshama Mishum Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh, Makizim Dam L'Srochni, whether it is strep throat, whether it's diphtheria, b'Shabbos. Mishin Eshchoch, Kelev Shotem Achino Somechet Tzar Kovei Shalom. HaChoshish B'Piv Matilo Sam b'Shabbos. Chacham Omrim, B'Elu Ein Mihem Mishum Refuah. B'Elu Lemutei Mai. Which kind of refuah did the Chachamim advocate? And they gave it their, how do you say, gushpanka? They gave it their okay. My love, atarti basraisa, which means the last two cases, which is nishacho kelev or netilas sam b'Shabbos. And on these two, they said, ein b'hem mishum refuah, lim'ute dereisha. However, akozas dam, in the case of diphtheria, that is a valid, bona fide therapeutic method that even the Chachamim would agree to Rabbi Masya, and you're allowed to implement that on Shabbos. So we see clearly, therefore, according to this interpretation of the Brisa, that the Chachamim could see to Rabbi Masya ben Cheresh with regard to akozas dam b'Shabbos, for choli askara, but only for choli askara. And the Gemara rejects this lo atarti de reisha kamaisa. There are two in the reisha here in this list, two in the top part of the list that the Chachamim accepted. Not only akozas dam for the askara case, no, I'm sorry, atarti de reisha kamaisa, means the first two in the Reisha are the ones that the Chachamim vehemently disagreed. And they rejected that method. What are the two in the Reisha? That's Hakazis Dam for a Chola Askara and the Kaved for Nashcho Nasha Kelev Shota. Lemute the Sefer. In what case did the Chachamim concede to Rabbi Masya that this is a bona fide, reliable refuah that we can implement on Shabbos? That's the case of the Sefer. That's the case of the concoction for a gum disease, which Modim Chachamim Rabbi Masya ben Cheresh, they agree that you're allowed to be matil some b'Shabbos for someone who's choshesh b'piv. That we have no proof that the Chachamim accepted and validated Hakozas Adam as a method for dealing with asker, whether it's diphtheria or maybe it's a strep throat that got out of control. So we'll stop here on the top of Pei Daled Amid Beis. And the honest truth is that if the Gemara is going to continue more with different types of refuah, I leave myself the license of possibly skipping because we don't have much time. As I mentioned to you, I want to perhaps move on to a Perek in Yevamis, and we'll see how that goes. So let me take this opportunity to wish everyone a great Shabbos, and thank you for the whole week.